April 1945. The war is ending, but the dying is not. South of the crumbling heart of the Third Reich, the air is thick with the smell of wet pine, diesel exhaust, and cold mud. For the men of the 12th Armored Division, attached to the U.S. 7th Army, this is the entire world. Their normal is the rumble of the Sherman tank's engine, the metallic clack, clack, clack of the tracks, and the pervasive, bone-deep exhaustion that follows weeks of relentless advance. They are pushing through Bavaria, a land that looks too much like a storybook, all rolling hills and dense forests, a landscape violently interrupted by the blackened skeletons of Wehrmacht half-tracks and the sudden personal terror of an 88mm shell. The men are veterans now, not by choice, but by survival. The green replacements who landed in France are long gone, replaced by these hard, quiet men who measure distance in fuel tank capacity and time in enemy engagements. Their focus is singular: the next town, the next river, the next pocket of resistance. Sergeant Elias Thorne, commanding a rifle squad in an armored infantry company, leans against the steel flank of an M3 half-track. He is 26, but his eyes carry the flat, observational weariness of a man twice his age. He lights his last cigarette, cupping the flame against the damp Bavarian chill. The air here feels wrong. It has felt wrong for 2 days. It's not just the smell of cordite or the distant sour scent of death they all know too well. This is something new. A heavy, chemical sweetness layered over something indescribably foul, a scent that clings to the back of the throat. The men mutter about it. "Must be a chemical plant, Sarge," one private offers, spitting. "Or the whole damn Kraut army died in one spot." Thorne just nods, scanning the tree line. He trusts his senses, and his senses tell him this is not the smell of battle. It is the smell of industry, but an industry he cannot name. The column lurches forward, the engines roaring to life, drowning out the quiet. They are moving toward a town called Landsberg, but the orders from Battalion HQ are strange. Bypass the main town, secure a work camp designated on the map as Kofringer 4. It's just another line on a map, just another objective to be taken. The tension in the column mounts as they leave the main road, turning onto a muddy track cut deep into the forest. The trees press in, their high branches blocking the weak afternoon sun, casting the advance into a premature twilight. The pervasive, sickening smell grows stronger with every yard until it is no longer just a scent, but a physical presence, a gagging, suffocating weight. The men pull their scarves over their faces. Thorne feels a prickle of unease that has nothing to do with ambush. He has fought SS units before. He knows their fanaticism. But this is different. This is a cold, creeping dread. They round a bend and see it. A high wire fence, stark and black against the grey sky, stretched between crude wooden watchtowers. Inside, there is no movement, no gunfire, no surrender, just silence. The advance element, a light tank and Thorne's half-track, halts 50 yards from the main gate. The tank's cannon swivels, covering the guard tower, but the tower is empty. "Sarge," his driver whispers, his voice tight. "Where is everybody?" Thorne chambers around in his M1 rifle. The silence is the problem. In war, silence is never peace. It's a vacuum waiting for violence. He looks at his men, Gallo with the bar, Ramirez the medic, their faces pale beneath the grime. They are soldiers, trained for a direct and brutal calculus of force. They understand cover and concealment, fields of fire, and the physics of an exploding shell. What they do not understand is this: This place feels like a violation of the rules of war itself. The air hums. Thorn looks through his binoculars. He sees rows of low, dark structures. They look like animal pens, half buried in the mud. Then he sees a flicker of movement near the wire. Not a soldier, something else. What he didn't know, an officer would later write in his report, was that this day would redefine the very nature of the enemy we fought. And the historical problem is one of scale, a problem the Allied command is only just beginning to comprehend. The Nazi state in its final frantic death throes is not merely a military entity. It is an ideological machine built on the systematic processing of human beings. While Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, CHEF, focuses on the destruction of the Wehrmacht and the capture of industrial centers, a secondary, darker infrastructure operates in parallel. This is the SS Business Administration Main Office, the Wirtschaftsverwaltungshauptamt or WVHA. Its function, the exploitation and extermination of millions. By 1945, this system is vast. A network of over 1,000 camps and subcamps stretching from the Baltic to the Alps. The records are meticulous. Field reports detail the failure of sanitation, the attrition of the workforce, the logistics of transporting units from one depot to another. These are not simply prisons, they are engines of annihilation, bifurcated into two distinct types. The Vernichtungslager, extermination camps, located primarily in occupied Poland, and the Konzentrationslager, concentration camps, within the Reich itself. As the Red Army pushes from the east, the Vernichtungslager like Auschwitz are hastily evacuated. The survivors are forced on death marches westward into the Reich's network of concentration camps, which now become catchment basins of unimaginable misery. Camps like Dachau, Buchenwald and Bergen-Belsen swell far beyond capacity. The subcamp network, like the one at Kaufering, part of the Dachau complex, is established to provide slave labor for vast, secret underground factories, building aircraft like the Messerschmitt Me-262. The German war machine is literally being fueled by the physical consumption of its captives. An internal SS memo from late 1944 is cold in its precision. The work pace at Project Ringeltaube, the Kaufering complex, must be maintained, regardless of the cost to the prisoner contingent. Replacements are available from the east. This is the bureaucracy of hell. A system so vast and so alien to the Western liberal mind that initial intelligence reports are often dismissed as Soviet propaganda or hysterical exaggeration. The human consequence of this administrative data is a reality that defies language. For the Allied soldier, the enemy is a man in a field-grey uniform with a rifle. The cost of war is shrapnel, trench foot, amputations, and the death of comrades. It is tactical, physical, and in its own brutal way, logical. This other war is not. The statistics, 6 million, 10 million, 11 million, are just numbers, too large to hold any emotional weight. It is the specific, individual suffering that fractures the mind. It is the typhus that sweeps through the camps, a biological firestorm consuming thousands. It is the institutionalized starvation, where the daily ration is calculated in calories, 800, then 600, then 300, a slow, deliberate dismantlement of the human body. The exhaustion is not the fatigue of a soldier after a long march. It is the terminal exhaustion of a body consuming its own muscle and organ tissue to survive. The weather, the same Bavarian chill that makes Sergeant Thorne cup his cigarette, is a weapon. In the covering earth huts, prisoners sleep on bare, frozen mud without blankets, their thin striped uniforms rotting off their bodies. The morale of the prisoners is not low in the military sense. It has been systematically erased. The SS guards employ a calculated program of dehumanization, stripping away name, family, dignity, and finally, the will to live. Survivors will later describe this state as Muselman, a camp slang term for a prisoner on the verge of death, a walking automaton, indifferent to beatings, starvation, or hope. This is the reality that the GIS are advancing toward. They are prepared for a fight against soldiers. They are completely, utterly unprepared for a rescue mission in an industrial abattoir. Their field manuals contain precise instructions for disabling a Panther tank and protocols for processing prisoners of war. They contain nothing for confronting piles of human bodies stacked like cordwood, or for speaking to a living being whose weight has dropped to 60 pounds. The human mind has a firewall, a mechanism of disbelief that protects it from such profound horror. The men of the 12th Armored are about to breach that firewall. Experts, if any had been asked, would have agreed. A conventional soldier is psychologically unequipped for this. It simply cannot be processed. If stories like these about the intersection of human endurance and historical reality are important to you, we invite you to continue this journey with us. The events that follow are a testament to the fact that the hardest battles are often fought after the guns fall silent. Sergeant Elias Thorne is not a man given to wild imagination. He is a product of Alliance, Ohio. Before the war, he taught American history to high school sophomores. He is built squarely, with a teacher's patience and an infantryman's pragmatism. He enlisted in 1942 not out of a thirst for adventure, but from a deep Midwestern sense of obligation. He believes in the Declaration of Independence and the Four Freedoms. He is, at his core, a rationalist. He understands cause and effect, strategy and consequence. He has seen death. He has seen towns shelled to rubble in France. He has seen his own men fall. He has processed this, filed it away as the cost of war. War is a terrible logical equation. You fight, you win, or you lose. You kill the enemy before he kills you. This framework is what holds him together. His background is in maps, dates, and the clear progression of human events. He sees the world as a series of problems to be solved. A river is an obstacle to be crossed. An enemy machine gun is a position to be flanked. A rumor of a sick camp is just that. A rumor, or at S's most, a POW enclosure that has fallen on hard times, a consequence of Germany's collapsing supply lines. His mind, trained by history and hardened by combat, seeks the most logical explanation. Atrocity propaganda is a part of war. He knows this. He has seen the pamphlets dropped by his own side. He is skeptical by nature. This skepticism is his armor, more effective than his steel helmet. It protects his sanity. He is leading his men into a situation he has filed under mop-up operation. He is prepared to find tired German guards and sullen, underfed prisoners. He is not prepared for the surreal. He is not prepared for a place where the laws of logic, reason, and human nature have been suspended. The idea that confronts him is not an invention, but a dawning, terrible realization. It begins at the gate. Cautiously, Thorne and two of his men, Gallo and Ramirez, advance. The wire is 10 feet high, charged, with insulators gleaming dully. The main gate is closed but not locked. A single SS guard lies near the gatehouse, dead, not from a bullet, but from a self-inflicted shot to the temple. "He took the easy way out," Gallo mutters, nudging the body with his boot. "Coward." Thorne says nothing. The smell is thick, choking, a physical barrier. He ties his handkerchief over his nose and mouth. His men do the same. "Ramirez, you're on point. Gallo, cover the huts. Let's move." Thorne pushes the gate open. The creak of the hinges is the only sound. The camp is laid out before them, mud, ankle-deep and viscous. And the huts, dozens of them, crude structures of wood and earth, like Neolithic burial mounds. But the silence is what screams. "Where is everyone?" Ramirez whispers, his M1 carbine held high. Thorne signals for the rest of the squad to follow, to fan out. He approaches the first hut. The doorway is just a dark hole. He calls out, "Hello, anyone in there? We're Americans. Americana?" No answer. He clicks on his flashlight, its beam cutting the gloom, and the world stops. It is not empty. The hut is full. Bodies stacked 3 and 4 deep. They are not bodies, they are skeletons draped in skin that is grey and translucent. In the flashlight's beam, a pair of eyes open, huge and hollow, in a face that is only a skull. A hand, no thicker than a bundle of twigs, rises weakly. Thorne stumbles back, gagging, ripping his mask off. "Medic! Ramirez! Get the medic!" He is shouting, his voice cracking. He turns to Gallo, who has frozen, his bar dangling from his hand. "Gallo, what do you see?" Gallo just points, unable to speak. Between 2 of the huts is a pile, a heap of things. It is a pile of human bodies, naked, emaciated, tangled together like driftwood, waiting for disposal. Thorne's mind, the rational teacher's mind, tries to find a file for this. It finds nothing. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen," he whispers, but the words are nonsense. It is not stupid. It is impossible. But it is right in front of him. His decision is no longer tactical. It is purely human. He keys his radio. "Battalion 6. This is Thorne. Get everyone here. Get the colonel. My God, get everyone." The preparation for the secret test is not the construction of a prototype. It is the simple, terrible act of bearing witness. The rest of Thorne's unit moves into the camp, a staggered line of combat-hardened men, their weapons lowered, their faces a mixture of confusion and visceral horror. The allies in this endeavor are not engineers. They are the Signal Corps photographers who arrive an hour later, summoned by the grim, frantic calls from the 12th Armored's command. The materials they gather are not steel and wire. They are images. They are the stark black and white frames that will burn this place into the world's memory. The setting is a geography of hell. The mud is a slurry of filth, lime, and human waste. The air hums with the sound of flies and a low, continuous moan that seems to come from the earth itself, the sound of hundreds of men dying. And Thorne moves with a medic, Lieutenant Eli Weiss, a Jewish doctor from New York who joined the 103rd Evacuation Hospital. Weiss is the new engineer, a man who must now invent a new kind of medicine on the fly. They move from hut to hut. The sensory details are overwhelming. The sight of living men so emaciated they cannot stand. The sound of dozens of languages, Yiddish, Polish, Russian, French, all whispering the same 2 words, water, bread. The stench is so powerful that several GIS become physically ill, vomiting beside the huts. Thorne finds a soldier, a big private from his own squad, sitting on the ground, weeping uncontrollably. "I can't, Sarge," the man sobs. "I can't. They ain't even human." Thorne pulls him to his feet, his face a mask of cold fury. "You look," he orders, his voice low and shaking. "You look at it. You will remember this. This is the test. Not to fight, but to see. To force the mind to accept the unacceptable. The test begins. It is a failure of human kindness. The soldiers, in a wave of desperate compassion, do the only thing they know how to do. They give away their food. They break out their K-rations, their D-bars, the chocolate and cigarettes they have hoarded for weeks. They hand them to the skeletal figures who crawl from the huts. And the first failure happens immediately. Men who have not eaten solid food in months take one bite of the rich rations and die, their systems collapsing in shock. Ramirez, the medic, screams at them. "No, stop! You're killing them! Stop feeding them!" The soldiers freeze, their hands full of food, their faces etched in despair. They have survived a war only to murder the people they came to save, with the one thing they thought was good. The breakthrough comes not from a single moment, but from a slow, agonizing pivot. It comes from Lieutenant Weiss, who takes charge with a desperate clarity. "Get me blankets, get me water, just water, and soup. If you have soup, thin it out, broth, nothing else." The machine of the U.S. Army, built for logistics and combat, slowly grinds to a new purpose. Field kitchens are ordered up. Men build fires. They heat water in their own helmets. They create a thin, warm broth from bouillon cubes. This is the breakthrough test. They begin to feed the survivors spoonful by spoonful. It is a success. A man, his eyes rolling back, swallows and manages to whisper, "Danke." The GIS, who just moments before were hardened fighters, are now transformed into the gentlest of nurses. They cradle the heads of dying men, cleaning their faces, giving them sips of water. The shock is replaced by a cold, profound rage and a deeper, more terrible sorrow. They see the crude crematorium, the piles of shoes, the rooms filled with human hair. The test is complete. The impossible is real. If stories of this profound human moment fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of this liberation is a battle of a different kind. The confrontation happens less than 24 hours later. It is not a tribunal, but a forced pilgrimage. The division's commander, his face a granite mask of fury after walking through the camp, summons the ranking officers. The report he sends to 7th Army headquarters is stripped of all military decorum. It is a raw document of shock. "The scenes within this camp," he dictates to a trembling clerk, "are beyond description. The evidence of starvation, brutality, and mass murder is incontestable. But the immediate confrontation is not with superiors. It is with the local German populace. The nearby town of Landsberg is untouched by the war. Its citizens are well-dressed, their shops full. When questioned, they claim ignorance. "We knew nothing," the mayor insists, his face pale. "We were told it was a work camp. We smelled the smoke. But we thought it was the factory." The colonel's response is immediate and absolute. "Sergeant Thorne," he orders, "take a detail into the town. Round up every civilian, man, woman, and child. They're going to see this." The skeptical dialogue is one of sullen denial. "This is not our responsibility," a local priest protests. "We are civilians." A GI shoves him forward with his rifle. "Move. You're gonna get an education." Thorn leads the procession, a grim parade of German civilians forced to march the 2 miles to the Kaufering camp. Their faces are a mixture of fear, resentment, and arrogance. They are confronted at the gate by the piles of unburied dead. The transformation is instant and violent. The arrogance shatters. Women faint. Men weep or vomit. The passionate defense is not made by Thorn. It is made by the evidence itself. Thorn watches them, his face devoid of pity. "You didn't know," he says, his voice quiet, to a man in a clean suit who is doubled over, retching. "You didn't smell it? You've been breathing this for a year. You knew." The confrontation is a forced transfer of knowledge, a burning of the truth into the eyes of the willfully blind. The superiors who arrive, including General George S. Patton, have the same reaction. Patton, known for his profane toughness, turns pale and silently walks away to be sick. The institutional tension dissolves. There is no skepticism now, only a unified, horrified resolve. The report becomes the most powerful weapon of all, the camera. The colonel gives a direct order to the Signal Corps unit. "Film everything. I want the world to see this. I want every German to see what their nation did." The real test in combat is not against a military foe, but against time and disease. The 12th Armored Division and the attached medical units are now fighting a war on 2 fronts. The first is humanitarian. The camp is a typhus bomb. The medics, led by Lieutenant Weiss, institute a strict quarantine. The battlefield is one of sanitation. GIS, using bulldozers, are forced to dig massive graves. The German civilians from Landsberg are brought back, given gloves and masks, and ordered to bury the dead. It is a grim, horrific task, a forced reckoning. The soldiers, meanwhile, set up delousing stations, spraying thousands of survivors with DDT. They burn the filthy huts to the ground. They establish a field hospital in a clean, requisitioned SS barracks, laying the survivors on fresh army cots. The logistical power of the U.S. Army, once aimed at destruction, is now bent towards salvation. The second front is the combat of documentation. The Signal Corps photographers move with a clinical, detached precision. Their cameras are their weapons. They film the bodies. They film the survivors, asking them to hold up their tattooed numbers. They film the gas chambers, disguised as showers. They film the crematoria ovens, some still containing ash and bone fragments. This test is a success, but it is a victory without triumph. The impact is quantified not in objectives taken, but in lives saved. Of the thousands found alive, hundreds still die in the days that follow, too far gone for even modern medicine to save. But thousands more are stabilized. The official recognition is swift and absolute. General Eisenhower, upon visiting a similar camp at Ohrdruf, makes a historic command. "I want every American unit not on the front line to see this place," he orders. "We are told that the American soldier does not know what he is fighting for. Now, at least, he will know what he is fighting against." The silent approval is in the faces of the soldiers themselves. The war is no longer about territory. It is about extinguishing the evil that built this place. The historical consequences are immediate and profound. The films and photographs taken at Kaufering, Dachau, Buchenwald, and Bergen-Belsen are flown to Washington and London. They are released to the public. The world, weary of war, is suddenly confronted with a horror that eclipses the violence of the battlefield. Headlines in Life magazine and the New York Times do not just report on the camps, they show them. The graphic, undeniable proof silences any remaining doubt about the nature of the Nazi regime. The term concentration camp becomes a permanent fixture in the global vocabulary, a benchmark for absolute evil. In the short term, this evidence galvanizes the Allied resolve during the final weeks of the war and shapes the agenda for the upcoming Potsdam Conference. The long-term effects are even deeper. The footage becomes primary evidence at the Nuremberg trials. High-ranking Nazi officials, when confronted with the films, can no longer plead ignorance or military necessity. The images prove a systematic industrial policy of genocide. For the liberators, the legacy is personal and agonizing. Elias Thorne goes home to Ohio, but he does not return to teaching history. He finds he can no longer speak of dates and battles with the same academic detachment. He, like many veterans of the 12th Armored, never speaks of what he saw at Kaufering. Not to his wife, not to his children. The silence of the liberators becomes a well-known phenomenon. They were, as one veteran later described, spectators in hell. They carried the smell, the images, the sounds with them for the rest of their lives. It was a trauma that had no name, a wound that could not be seen or treated. The humble legacy is in their quiet insistence on tolerance, their visceral, lifelong hatred of bigotry. Decades later, when the concept of the Holocaust begins to be questioned by revisionists, it is these aging veterans, in their 70s and 80s, who finally break their silence, providing the first-hand human testimony that anchors the historical fact. Their witness, bought at the cost of their own peace, becomes the foundation of Holocaust education and remembrance. The event at Kaufering IV is a pivot point in modern consciousness. It is the moment the abstract concept of evil becomes a verifiable, documented, and industrial reality. The soldiers of the 12th Armored Division were not prepared for what they found, because in 1945 the human mind was not built to contain such a possibility. They went expecting to fight soldiers and found they had to liberate skeletons. They were trained to take lives and were instead forced to save them, often with the terrible counterintuitive knowledge that their kindness, their chocolate, their rations could kill. This paradox is the core of the Liberator's experience. Today, the principles of humanitarian intervention, disaster response, and the rules of engagement for peacekeeping forces are all, in part, descended from the lessons learned in those chaotic, horrifying days in April 1945. We now have protocols for dealing with mass starvation and epidemic disease. We have legal frameworks, like the Geneva Conventions and the concept of crimes against humanity, that were born directly from the evidence these soldiers gathered. The universal truth laid bare in that Bavarian forest is that civilization is a fragile veneer. It is not a fortress, but a thin membrane that requires constant defense. The GI. Heirs who breached that gate were confronted with the starkest possible choice, not between victory and defeat, but between humanity and despair. Their legacy is not one of triumph, but of witness. They prove that the most crucial human act in the face of impossible darkness is not to fight, not to win, but simply to see and to remember. The wind still blows through the pines at Landsberg, but the ground where the hut stood is now silent, a scar on the earth holding its memory. Every act of witnessing is a defense against impossibility. What impossible truths do you think we are failing to witness today?